Hi, this is Doug Whedon with thewalledgarden.net. Why is Christianity so ridiculous and nonsense to many people? Why is that? Well, beyond the idea that there are many people who don't want it to be true, and beyond the idea of there are just oppositional people to whatever you have to say, there are actually sincere people out there who feel like there's just not enough evidence to support the existence of God. And so they run up against this obstacle. It's like a wall, it's like a brick wall, and they can't get past that. And so they just kind of let it go at that. That's not an unusual thing to come across people who feel that way. Excuse me. Well, it's partly true that God doesn't provide evidence for his existence. There is that does exist, you know, and primarily it's because our intimacy with him, okay, for those who have come to repentance and have an ongoing life with God and who are concerned about walking in the light and staying there and clinging to him, the intimacy that comes from that is not transferable to someone else, to no one else. It's actually, we can point towards God, we can talk about our experience, but the actual confidence that we have in him, the actual trust that we practice, the actual intimacy that we experience is not transferable to anyone else in a social setting, you see. So if God and I are talking and then we have another person standing off to the side and saying, what is going on with you? You know, we can't transfer what's going on to them. So there are no social avenues for that to pass over. And God created things like that. He engineered life to be like that because what he's after, you see, is an individual, intimate one-on-one relationship, and he wants everyone to take advantage of that. But there are many people who don't take advantage of that, but stand back as a social group and say, why doesn't God provide evidence to us as a social group? And I'm talking about sincere people make that mistake. If we stand back for a minute and look at an example, for instance, let's say we attend a lecture of a famous, renowned atheist, let's say, and they come on, you know, and the auditorium is packed, and there's media coverage, and they began to make a case about how ridiculous the existence of God is because of the lack of evidence that's out there. And he was talking about scientific objective evidence. He's talking about, you know, social impact of how people might be steered towards him if he would just provide some evidence for himself. Well, he goes on and he makes a good case, and he goes through all of the actual things that are actually true. And he assesses the situation well. And then he ends up his lecture in the process calling down fire and brimstone on himself and blaspheming God and spitting at him and such things. And he says, if you exist, God, take me out right here. And he says to the group, he says, this is for your benefit, because if he takes me out right here with fire and brimstone, even though I die, you will be convinced, you know, in that process. So there's a little bit of martyrdom, you see, that's happening on his behalf, a self-sacrifice, you might say, in the process. So you look at that picture, and you can understand how confused people can be because God didn't step in and say a word. He didn't do a thing. And so the group laughs and shrugs it off and says, well, obviously, God doesn't exist. Well, the problem is that they have completely missed the point, you see. And I'm not talking about completely missing the point because they haven't gone and read the original historical records, and that they take into account the actual evidence that's going on. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that they've missed the point, that they have tried to seek the evidence from a social point of view rather than a personal point of view. You see, if each person, along with the lecturer, everybody in that auditorium, if they went out and just took a year, 6 months or a year, and wholeheartedly and honestly on their own began to seek God by, getting into the scriptures and finding out what he has been saying all these years and talking to him one-on-one, I can guarantee that they would suddenly be immersed in evidence, which is a personal connection. You see, it's kind of a distraction to read a book and say, oh, didn't that make a good case about God? And that should convince people. No, God set it up that they would be convinced if they sought him personally. And that's what we need to do in our lives, is not just point to Christ, but give them this message that they can connect with him if they go seek him with all their heart and all their soul and all their mind. And if you just took 6 months or a year of concentrated effort on that, I can guarantee you would find him. Whether you came to repentance and you found out, you may find out things you didn't want to know and you just walk away. But I can guarantee he will engage you, you see, in that process. And so there's this kind of misunderstanding that somehow God is supposed to give evidence of himself to all of society and to great amounts of people. And if he doesn't, then he's impotent or he doesn't exist. No, the point is, we've missed the point in that. What he has set up is a system in which it's up to the individual for themselves to seek him and to find out what he, what he's willing to do in response to their seeking. And that really doesn't take a lot of time, but 6 months or a year would be plenty, you see. But what it does take is a complete honesty and a complete vulnerability and transparency and a wholeheartedness that you're going to enter into that without any attitudes and any prejudices or anything, and that you will directly try to connect with him. If you do that, you see, no matter who it is, I don't care if it's the renowned atheist or the person who has just sincerely found themselves at this place where they can't find any social evidence. Anybody can connect with him today, as long as you do it on your own, you see, because that's what he wants. He will respond to that, and he's glad to do it, Once we do connect with him and come to repentance, then the social part kicks in. There is a social aspect to Christianity. It's actually huge. But the center, ground zero of our life with God is our individual connection with him. And then once that happens, he moves us into the social context. And he wants us to begin to invest and associate with and bond with others who have come to repentance. And then we share, as we move forward, we share in partnership and fellowship and prayer and social interaction and the studying that we need to do and the investing in the ministry as we find people who are in need and we begin to point them in the direction. But the issue is that our personal trust, the thing at ground zero, cannot be transferred into another person's life, even if it's our spouse or our children or our friends around us. It cannot be transferred. And so therefore, there are no social proofs. The proof comes when we seek him with all our heart as an individual. I encourage you to step out of the world system, come up for air, and take a breath.